Hello folks, Jim Voss, high above my garage, 8 or 10 feet, with another edition. I guess we're somewhere around 200 now. 200 broadcasts from the smallest studio in the world of just my opinion. Now, this is the first time we've ever shot opposite. This is the back of the studio, not the front. So we're going to give it a try. I told you that after the release of all the documents for the RFK, JFK, MLK assassinations, that we get started on them. Always remember, keep your eye on this hand, I'm going to screw you with this one. Everything must have a certain amount of smoke and mirrors to take away your attention from that one important event in the history of the United States of America. At the time of its happening, 75 years ago or so, for JFK and then RFK after that and then MLK after that, it just, whatever entity they put in charge of the investigation is always retired senators, heads of state, but they're always going to answer to the federal government. Herein lies the problem. Let's say that I'm a farmer and I raise chickens, nice laying hens, and that's my livelihood. This fox comes along and kills 4 or 5 of my chickens. Would I go get my shotgun and go out into the woods looking for this fox? In today's society, I would go to the Fox investigation team, a government agency, and I would ask them to look into the killing of my hens. And this is the report they would come back with. You're mistaken. That fox did not kill your hens. You simply lost track of those hens. You were a bad fiduciary of those eggs that you were getting. And we believe that the amount of money you were receiving is against the IRS principles. And therefore, the federal government will be filing charges against you for tax evasion, and also the National Hens Association has filed molestation charges against you for running your hands up under their bottom side and taking those eggs. We're thinking about grand larceny. But as far as the fox goes, there's no there. That's what we do when we have an assassination. That's what's going to happen with all the waste and fraud that the president and Musk are uncovering. How do you find $200 billion in a week? In a week where these aid programs are supposed to be feeding the starving children, are building mansions and riding around in limousines, and Maxine Waters. Can you imagine waking up to that every morning? Funneling $1 million of your taxpayers to her daughter. My. Your tax dollars at work. So anyhow, once the big theft is done with, okay, and they get caught stealing, this is what's going to happen. They're federal employees. First of all, the House will issue a subpoena for them to come and testify before the House subcommittee on umpty. They will recommend that it be sent to the Senate Well, the Senate will have more hearings. And then guess what? The Senate is going to recommend the punishment, send it back to the House. Once that's done, the Senate will decide. I'll say that again. The Senate will decide what the punishment is. Hello, is this the Fox agency? I want to call you about a fox I think are killing my hens. CYA in every elected position is grossly rampant. If you were a House member and you knew that this person in front of you was guilty of sin, but they had a backdoor connection to you and some of your other buddies, would you send that case forward to the Senate so that they could come up with a punishment, send it back down to you folks at the House, and then all of a sudden the next subpoena is yours? Of course you're not going to. Then let's cure the problem. I don't know how this got started to begin with. We simply turn it over to God. Don't turn it over to the DOJ or the FBI. That's two of the biggest crooks on the face of the planet. Weaponized. Evil. Let's put them in a courtroom with a bulldog prosecutor. Let's use Trey Gowdy. Yeah, I like old Trey. Trey was a pit bull. Didn't care who he made mad. Let's try them. I know this is hard to fathom. Wrap your mind around this. Let's try them with a jury of their own peers in a regular old courtroom. All those taxpayers on that jury, they're going to bring back the firing squad, I guess. Okay, but that's not our podcast. I'm just telling you. And I had a list that my wife sent to me. She's finally starting to listen to my podcast. I don't have it here. But no one got over $100 million. But our favorite son, Madam Lindsay, $87 million with his hand in the Ukraine cookie jar. Mitch McConnell, hey, Mitch says it's time to retire. Yeah, I guess so. They so far up your river end now, you'll think they're proctologists for the Republican Party. Yes, indeedy. We got some Republicans on there, but Miss Cheney, who can't make up her mind what she is, she's on there too. We had some that were down to 20 million, but the big hitters, crying Chuck Schumer, he's gonna be able to buy a lot of tissue with that $89 million he got. And of course, have another toddy, Nancy Pelosi's on there. She's the home run hitter. I think she's 90 million. And they wonder why. Let me back up. You write a check to your creditor, and 100% of that money goes to your creditor. You get money from the federal government, and by the time you send it to the troops, or whatever, whomever you're going to send money to, everybody has a chance to take a bite out of there. So if you get $100 billion, by the time everybody gets done siphoning off what they consider to be their fair share, and rightfully their fair share, you might end up with a $40 million budget, $40 billion. But then you got to consider they're going to put riders. We don't do standalone on accounts. What we're going to do is we're going to put riders. I need $100 million to build a road to nowhere in Bogalusa, Mississippi. And you get that, because this is a rider. You don't even have to debate it. Just get the big money approved. All right, let's move on to what we're talking about. I got about 20 pages, and I'm not smart enough to memorize it all, so I'm going to do talking points. Donald Trump made a move just recently to release all of the documents pertaining to the assassinations of Martin Luther King, Robert Kennedy Jr., Robert Kennedy, and JFK. When they said they were going to release the documents, I thought they would release a document. But what we're getting is an 80% redacted document, which means you got to be able, like the Enigma, to put it together piece by piece to try and understand what 20 words on this page will mean. And then they withheld 10% of the documents. Now, if you're given the order, an executive order, to release all of this information, does it all mean all? Okay. If someone's going to donate a heart, that's a whole heart. They wouldn't give you 90% of a heart. So when you get the executive order and you're the bean counter, the paper pusher, whatever the hell your job is, and you're told to release the documents, who decides whether you're only going to get 90%? And why, if you're going to release the sensitive information, why is it redacted? In order to be released, it's got to be declassified. Well, if it's declassified, there's no need for the redaction. Potato, I don't know. Let me tell you what. I'm going to tell you who did the killing. Who did the assassination. And you see if it fits in. RFK became, and I remember when this happened, RFK became enemies with one of the most powerful people in the federal government, and that was J. Edgar Hoover, or Mrs. Hoover, however you want to look at it, depending on the dress he's wearing that day. Bobby Kennedy was for the civil rights movement. LBJ was never for the civil rights movement. When his boss, when John was for the civil rights movement, I don't know how in the world they paired up, these two, or how LBJ ever got anywhere close. You know, him being a sod farmer and being in the oil business in Texas, he was not White House material. That's all there was to it. They had in Selma, Alabama, a march to which Bobby Kennedy helped set up. They knew there were going to be serious problems, so they had the National Guard. Now, you got to consider the National Guard at that time was 100% white, or 99% white. So Bobby Kennedy wanted J. Edgar Hoover to supplement the National Guard by putting federal agents, trying to embed them into the crowds to prevent violence. Well, I told you, J. Edgar Hoover did not like Bobby Kennedy at all. So when the march started, it was peaceful. And then, of course, the local law enforcement, it wasn't Bull Connor and his pit bulls at that time, but it's something similar to it, got out of hand. Well, guess what? J. Edgar Hoover had withheld that extra help, and a lot of people got hurt. And for that, Bobby Kennedy brought him, put his ass on the carpet, and in front of God and everybody, chewed his ass out and demanded his resignation. Well, let me tell you a little something about J. Edgar Hoover. When it comes time for budget money, every head of every division, every department, anybody who's begging for money to operate for the year will go in front of these budget committees and they will beg, borrow, plead, sell their soul to the devil, rob Peter to pay Paul. I don't care what they're going to do, but they got to have this amount of money, and they normally walk out with less than what they had to go line by line by line and justify every bit of money they're going to get. This was J. Edgar Hoover. He would walk in front of the committee, straighten his tie, sit down in that chair. he'd take his black folder and he would open it up. And he would say, "Gentlemen, for the fiscal year of 19 umpty-ump until 19 umpty-ump, I need X amount of billions of dollars to operate effectively. Thank you very much. Have a nice day." And he would get up and walk out of the meeting without ever having to justify a dime of his request. Why? Because in that little black folder, he had dirt on everybody that was on that committee. Sexual dirt, deviant dirt. And they knew that without approval, they'd be on, well, they didn't have YouTube then. I guess they would have been splashed somewhere in the back rooms first, and then in the front rooms, and then in the papers, and then the gravy train for them would have been over. They never turned J. Edgar Hoover down for a budget. And J. Edgar Hoover, as he left, and he got into the hallways, the Secret Service heard him say, "That little son of a bitch doesn't know who he is effing with. He'll never," think about that, "he'll never have the opportunity to put J. Edgar Hoover's ass in a bind again." J. Edgar Hoover was a revengeful person. He didn't have a problem coming after you, but of course he didn't want to get his high heels all broken off, so he had hundreds of henchmen, buffers, that went after the problem. The Kennedy family has long been friends and allies with the mob, with the mafia. Started out with Joe Kennedy going down into the Boweries in Chicago and spreading out liquor and money and buying votes for Jack. The deal was to get John Kennedy into office, and then the Kennedys, president and on down the line, would turn a blind eye to the operations of the mob. Let them run unfettered, so to speak. Well, Bobby became the Attorney General. Bobby didn't make that agreement. And so even though he was at odds with his brother, Bobby began to go after the mafia kingpins with bust about drugs and prostitution, things of that nature, and the underworld. Suspect number 2, the mafia. So we got suspect number 1, J. Edgar Hoover. Number 2, the mafia. The CIA operative known as David Sanchez Morales was at the Ambassador Hotel the night that Bobby Kennedy was shot exiting the kitchen, headed for the limo. Sanchez was a specialized shooter. In other words, the CIA employed him to assassinate people. He was also in Dallas on the same date and the same time that JFK was assassinated, and has bragged to his friends about how far he can make a shot. Suspect number 4. The various people within the United States viewed Bobby as an upstart. Bobby did not play by the rules. They saw him as a rich little Kennedy playboy with a silver spoon in his mouth that was for the civil rights movement. Let me tell you about the Democrat Party. From 1860 to 1960, a whole 100 years, the Democrat Party fought tooth and nail to keep the black man down and to be loyal to the party by giving him stuff, programs, welfare, getting him hooked on drugs. That's the Democrat Party. For 100 years, they never tried to get them the vote. They never tried to get them equality. They never tried to get them anything through civil rights. They never tried to get them out of the bonds and chains of slavery. That was all the Republican Party. But that's not what's being taught in the school. But that's a different podcast. Here's the smoking gun. I am a career military man, career law enforcement man. I have been around guns and bullets all my life. I have been in hundreds of investigations with crimes, from little crimes to big crimes. I know what a bullet can do. There's another podcast, but I already can tell you with JFK, the bullet that can travel 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, come out of the body, be found on the Gertie in the hallway, pristine condition, without a single mark on it, is a truckload of buffalo chips. Now let's look at Bobby. I want you to understand that all that I'm telling you is in this report. That any fifth grader who could read well would look at this and go, this is a crock. Sirhan was the perfect Manchurian candidate. First of all, Sirhan said the last thing that he remembered doing was having a cup of coffee with a lady in a polka dot dress. And that's it. To this day, 80 years of age, still alive, in prison, still serving that life term, does not remember anything beyond the point of having the cup of coffee with the lady in the polka dot dress. At the time of the shooting, the lady in the polka dot dress was identified as running away from the scene, yelling, "We've shot Kennedy. We have shot Kennedy." All right, let's look at the blatant lies that were told and are being supported by our government. First of all, Sirhan came face forward, straight on to Bobby Kennedy. He was carrying what's known as a .22 hand revolver, LR, long round. You got two rounds that go into a .22. One is a short round, an SR, and an LR, long round. One's a little more powerful than the other. But I want to make sure I get it right. I'll give you the nomenclature of the gun. It is a LR, long round, Ivor Johnson Cadet 55 revolver that holds a high-powered .22 round, and it holds 8 shots. Remember that. 8 shots. Now, do you remember when they ever reported how many shots were fired at Bobby Kennedy? I would have guessed about 3, maybe 4. What do you think? Maybe 5 even? The gun holds 8 shots. That was the gun taken out of his hand when the guy jammed his webbing so it wouldn't fire. How many shots do you think were fired? 13. 13 shots were fired. The gun held 8 shots. Sirhan was in front of, posture, to here, in front of Bobby Kennedy. Bobby Kennedy was not shot. He did not have a bullet hole in the front of his body. All 3 rounds hit the back of Bobby Kennedy. The other rounds went into the guard, an innocent bystander, and into the walls and ceiling. The 3 shots on Bobby Kennedy were 2 in the back, you ready, and 1 in the head. Sirhan's here, the shots hit here, the bullets hit here. The 2 in the back were not life-threatening. Bobby Kennedy remained alive for several minutes. The bullet that killed him was placed execution style, the same way the mob always does an execution. 1 inch across from the ear, at the base of the skull on the side, on the right side. It was fired 1 inch. It was fired 1 inch from the back of his head, the back of his head, and went forward into the brain. He didn't die instantly because the .22 is very small. It goes inside the body, it ricochets around. It's not like a regular round. It doesn't go all the way through the body itself. It's not powerful enough. Remember, all 3 rounds are in the backside of Bobby Kennedy, while Sirhan is on this side. Now here is the rest of the smoking gun. I love doing this. All 3 rounds. All 3 rounds never matched the 22 of Sirhan. Let me say that again. All 3 rounds, both to the back, 1 to the head, never matched up ballistically to the weapon of Sirhan. But yet, we believe that Sirhan was the only shooter. Does this sound familiar? Was the only shooter in the Ambassador Hotel basement kitchen that night. The bullet fragment in Bobby Kennedy's head is larger in caliber than the bullets in his back. But that larger caliber bullet did not match Sirhan's gun, and it could not travel around the body and go into the back or the head. 13 rounds does not come out of an 8-round weapon unless you stop to reload, and Sirhan never had time to do that. None of the 13 bullets that were found, fragments that were found, came from Sirhan's weapon. I don't even know if his weapon was even fired. I have no earthly idea. But it does not take a rocket scientist to put together a ballistics test and to match a .22 slug, what's left of it, to a .22 weapon. You still have the same markings as it goes down that barrel. I think they're called striations. Don't hold me to that. But the lands and grooves that are in a barrel as that bullet turns and comes out are unique like a snowflake. Two barrels are never going to generate the same lands and grooves that will be identical to each other. So, once again, we get a report from my mother, just riddled with bullshit, riddled with innuendo, riddled with lies, riddled with whatever you've made up in the back room while having a toddy with somebody else smoking a big black cigar. Just bullshit. But, as my mom and dad used to say, well, Walter Cronkite said it had to be true. It was in the paper. AP Press did it. It's got to be true. We're too busy believing a corrupt government. And we're too quick to let a corrupt government, God, we have gotten to be so corrupt. It's just not even funny. It's become this giant money laundering scheme to take our precious tax dollars and to waste them. I've done podcasts on trillions of dollars worth of worthless federal grants to study why Ethiopian hookers don't understand sex and why Chinese hookers drink too much. We like hookers. We give them millions of dollars. Well, we don't give them. They never get any money. But we give, hey, you want to get you some money? Come up with some bullshit story about something you want to prove. $170,000 of how an ant gets a grain of sand from the bottom of the mound to the top of the mound. That's your tax dollars at work. $117,000 to learn how to read to your children while you're at the laundromat and they will behave. We give away over 1 million of these worthless, non-payable. Don't pay them back. Just take the money, do your research, and fulfill your obligation to give the government a 3-page essay, I guess, like in junior high school. You don't have to pay a penny, not a penny's tax on it. Not a penny's tax. We can't let the fox continue to guard the hen house and expect to go to the same fox and get a rendering of a guilty verdict and finding fault with that fox because he knows there's another fox that works in the House, that works in the Senate, that's got the dirt on him. And if I put him in jail, I'll end up going to jail. I'm not talking about just the Democrats. That swamp needs to be drained on both ends of the pond. You see? On that list that I was talking about earlier, 3 prominent Republicans with their hands in the till, taking money away from Ukraine. While I was with the Ukrainians at first. I wanted them to kick Russia's ass because I wanted to have an ally on the front steps of the Kremlin. And I've always hated Rudy Putin. But now that's all changed. I see the cars, I see the homes, I see the private planes that Zelensky has. It's all the same way. If your war is not quick, and very few of them are, It becomes a cash cow to the war profiteers. Now, the war profiteers are not just the gun salesman, the ammo salesman, the equipment salesman, the tank salesman. No. War profiteers are your elected thieves because they get their hands on the money first before it goes out the door. They launder it. They put it into dummy shell corporations. They put it into their private funds. They put it into their pocket. They give it to their daughters. I guess Lindsay may be Barney Ensemble. I don't know. But I'm tired. I'm tired and I'm weary of giving these fools, these thieves, these corkscrewing, backstabbing, dirty dealing, knuckle dragging mofos our tax money and having them squander it, as I exposed the $2.78 trillion they stole out of Social Security. Don't come here to me. Man, if I show up at your political rally, you better hope to hell you get security to throw me out, because I'm going to go to jail. Don't tell me that you're here fighting for me. Don't tell me that you're the fiduciary of my money and you feel my pain. You don't feel squat. All you feel is your ass tilting more on one side than the other because your wallet's getting too fat with my tax dollars. I'll guarantee you, if we can get some of that black ink taken off the paperwork for JFK and Martin Luther King, you're going to find the same fairy tales. Once upon a time, we killed a sitting president. Speaking of that, don't watch this hand, I'm going to screw you with this one. Let's do the smoke and mirrors again. What have you heard about the update of the assassination attempts on Donald Trump? Chirp, chirp, chirp. Nothing. Nothing. Of course, now one kid's dead, and you know they got the other two. But nothing. By now you would have... I remember when the assassination attempt was on Reagan with Hinkle. Hinky, whatever his name. No, Mr. Hinky's on South Park. Okay, Hinckley, whatever his name was. Man, they investigated his cat. Everything about that guy was brought out into the open. Where he went to elementary school, where he went to junior high school, where he went to high school, what dropped out, whose girlfriends was, whose buddy was, whose neighbors were. They knew everything about him. What have you heard about the people who tried to assassinate Donald Trump? Nothing. The chirping is extremely loud. We're going to hit on the waste and fraud here one more. We're going along. It's 38 minutes now. The Democrats are incensed that in order to pare down the government, that people have got to go without a job. No shit. Really? And you made it all the way to being a senator? You made it all the way to a cabinet position and you don't understand. In the military, you have X amount of slots. You can have so many E1s, E2s, E3s, E4s, E5s, on up the line to the commander, which you got one slot. Now, if I went out here and I went over my budget and I hired me 5 commanders for one slot, I'd be fat cat then. So when the general comes in, the IG comes in and says, wait a minute, you can't have 5 commanders, you can only have 1. So 4 of you got to go. And I'm going to say, whoa, come on now. You're going to put these 4 people out of business? You're going to make them unemployed? Think about their children. They're going to go hungry. They're going to starve. Well, this will raise the budget. This will raise the deficit. This will This will raise the unemployment rate. What do you think you're doing? Hell, I don't know. It's pretty simple to me. We got a fat boy. We need a skinny boy. So the fat boy's got to go on a diet, which means he's got to unemploy mayonnaise and bread and a few other things. Then we'll have a skinny boy. That makes sense to me. You know, we take in $4.7 trillion. We spend $6.2 trillion. Come on now. Think about it. If I made $500 a week and I spent $700 a week, I would have all my cards maxed out and I'd be looking for a good bankruptcy attorney. We can't afford to go bankrupt. Right now we owe $37 trillion. Do you realize it's costing us $7 million a minute that we don't do it? $7 million a minute that we are sitting on our ass, scratching our scrotum, and we're not going to do anything about it because that's the way it's always been. Well, let me tell you what, we're not the only ones guilty of it. Virtually every country is in debt. We shuffle the debt between us and them, and not China that owns our ass, it's Japan. China's our second biggest creditor. But the hell with them. I'm worried about us. I'm worried about us. So in 43 minutes, I'm not that smart. We've gone in debt almost to $500 million. Stop letting the government try the government. Let the civilian court try the government. And some of these people that are squandering our tax money are going to go to jail. And maybe, I hope not, but maybe the next time when someone tries to kill off a president or any other elected official, maybe they'll come to justice. The next time, the right person will come to justice. The next time they squander our money and they buy them a penthouse or a limousine and they let the children go hungry and the soldiers go without bullets, maybe somebody will be held accountable. Maybe the right somebody and all the people who aided and abetted them, including our elected officials. This has been Jim Voss, high above my garage, 8 or 10 feet. I like this new position. I might do this from now on. This is very comfortable. We got to drain both ends of that swamp. I'm telling you, we got some slithering Republicans in there that when they die, they're so crooked they'll have to screw them into the ground. I love you. I love my vets, my first responders, especially all of my military people. All of my cops. I've been able to be a lot of that during my life. Tell your family you love them. Keep them close. I talked about for 2 years the war, the Civil War, that we still have not taken part in, but I believe is still coming. Keep your extra food, your extra fuel. Know your neighbors. Understand them. Form an alliance that you'll be together if things get bad. Take care of yourself. I love all of you, especially the blonde in the third row with the arthritis. Jim Voss. I've enjoyed this one. Get ready for the next one. That's going to be about the waste and fraud, and then we're going to look at Martin Luther King and once again JFK. how you don't get shot from the back and go backwards. More of that BS. Love it. Take care of yourself. Let me find my little button and find it up here on the screen, and we are out of here. Take care.